As the United States embraced its ambitious aircraft production plan, the nation faced a monumental challenge: transforming a peacetime economy into a war machine capable of producing planes, tanks, ships, and weapons on an unprecedented scale. Mobilizing industry for war was not simply about increasing production. It required a complete restructuring of factories, supply chains, labor forces, and management practices, all coordinated with military strategy. President Franklin D. Roosevelt recognized the urgency of the task. In 1940, he established the Office of Production Management, which later evolved into the War Production Board, tasked with overseeing the nation's conversion to a wartime economy. The goal was clear: every available resource, materials, manpower, and machinery had to be redirected towards supporting the war effort. Civilian production, from cars to household appliances, was curtailed or retooled for military purposes. Factories that once produced automobiles now assembled fighter planes. Shipyards that built cargo vessels shifted to constructing aircraft carriers and battleships. The scale of this mobilization was staggering. American industry employed millions of workers, including large numbers of women who had never before worked in heavy manufacturing. Training programs were established to equip them with the skills needed for complex tasks, from riveting aircraft fuselages to operating advanced machinery. Safety standards, efficiency methods, and production schedules were meticulously implemented to maximize output without compromising quality. Iconic images of workers in factories, welding and assembling aircraft components, symbolized the determination and unity of a nation committed to victory. Supply chains had to be completely reimagined. The raw materials necessary for war, steel, aluminum, rubber, and aviation fuel, were allocated with military priorities in mind. Railroads, trucks, and ports were coordinated to ensure timely delivery of parts and finished aircraft. Engineers developed standardized components, allowing planes to be assembled more quickly and repaired more efficiently in the field. Even minor improvements in assembly line processes led to exponential gains in output. Industrial mobilization was also supported by innovations in management and planning. Frederick Taylor's principles of scientific management were applied on a national scale, and factory supervisors implemented time and motion studies to identify bottlenecks. Production goals were constantly monitored, with adjustments made in real time to overcome obstacles. Contracts and incentives encouraged companies to exceed targets, fostering a sense of competition that drove unprecedented efficiency. The results were extraordinary. By the early 1940s, the United States was producing thousands of aircraft each month, rapidly closing the gap between planning and reality. Fighter planes, bombers, and transport aircraft rolled off assembly lines in numbers that stunned both allies and adversaries. Whereas Hermann Göring had mocked America's initial plans as impossible, the rapid pace of production proved him dramatically wrong. The industrial might of the United States would soon become a decisive factor in the war, demonstrating that preparation, organization, and innovation could outweigh even the most formidable enemy. Mobilizing industry for war also had a profound societal impact. Millions of Americans, including women and minorities, found themselves contributing directly to the war effort. Their labor, skill, and dedication not only supported the military but reshaped the American workforce, setting the stage for profound social and economic changes after the conflict. The factories became more than production centers. They were symbols of national unity, resolve, and the capacity to transform ambition into reality. Ultimately, the mobilization of industry for war illustrates the extraordinary power of human ingenuity, coordination, and determination. America's factories became the backbone of the Allied war effort, providing the planes, ships, and weapons necessary to challenge the Axis powers. The lesson was clear. In modern warfare, the ability to organize, produce, and innovate on a massive scale could determine the outcome of conflicts, turning what once seemed impossible into an undeniable reality. By the late 1930s, the Luftwaffe had become one of the most formidable air forces in the world. Born out of Germany's rearmament under Adolf Hitler, it was officially established in 1935, violating the Treaty of Versailles, which had strictly limited Germany's ability to maintain an air force. Under the direction of Hermann Göring, a former World War I fighter pilot and one of Hitler's closest allies, the Luftwaffe was transformed into a modern, well-equipped, and highly disciplined force capable of executing complex aerial operations. The Luftwaffe's structure combined fighters, bombers, and reconnaissance aircraft into a highly coordinated system. Fighters such as the Messerschmitt Bf 109 were fast, agile, and heavily armed, designed to establish air superiority and support blitzkrieg operations. The Luftwaffe's bomber fleet, including the Heinkel He-111 and Junkers Ju-88, was intended to strike deep into enemy territory, destroying infrastructure, supply lines, and communication networks before ground forces arrived. Meanwhile, reconnaissance planes provided real-time intelligence, allowing German commanders to make rapid, informed decisions on the battlefield. By the outbreak of World War II, Göring boasted that the Luftwaffe could outmatch any European adversary. The rapid invasions of Poland in 1939 and later France in 1940 seemed to confirm this belief. German planes dominated the skies, providing cover for advancing troops and conducting devastating bombing campaigns. Göring's confidence, however, was not based solely on numerical strength. It also stemmed from the training, discipline, and tactical doctrine instilled in every pilot, crew, and officer. The Luftwaffe's emphasis on combined arms tactics, integrating air power with mechanized ground forces, was revolutionary for the time. Despite these strengths, the Luftwaffe had significant limitations. Its industrial base was far smaller than that of potential adversaries like the United States. Germany relied heavily on imported raw materials, which made large-scale production vulnerable to blockade and supply disruptions. Additionally, while German aircraft were advanced, production could not match the sheer volume achievable by the American aircraft industry. Göring's insistence on maintaining a smaller, elite force meant that the Luftwaffe was highly effective in initial campaigns but lacked the capacity for prolonged attrition against a nation capable of mass production. Furthermore, strategic vision within the Luftwaffe was often constrained by political considerations. Göring, deeply involved in both military and governmental affairs, sometimes allowed personal ambition to influence operational decisions. The result was a force that was technologically impressive and tactically adept but strategically overstretched. Göring's belief that air power alone could secure victory underestimated the challenges of fighting a global war against industrially superior nations. By the time the United States began its large-scale aircraft production, the Luftwaffe's limitations became increasingly apparent. While German pilots were highly skilled and aircraft technologically sophisticated, the Luftwaffe could not match the rapid increase in numbers, diversity, and logistics that America could achieve. The contrast between Germany's elite-focused model and America's mass production approach would soon have dramatic consequences, particularly in the skies over Europe during critical campaigns such as the Battle of Britain and later the strategic bombing offensive against Germany itself. Understanding the state of the Luftwaffe provides crucial context for the events that followed. Göring's force was undoubtedly powerful, capable of shocking and overwhelming less prepared opponents. Yet, its effectiveness was finite, constrained by industrial capacity, strategic vision, and resource limitations. The Luftwaffe's initial triumphs lulled Göring and the German High Command into a sense of invincibility, a belief that would be severely tested as the United States mobilized its vast industrial potential to challenge and eventually surpass Germany in the air. In retrospect, the Luftwaffe represents both the brilliance and the hubris of Nazi military planning. It was an elite, modern force, unmatched in Europe at the time, but its limitations reveal the critical importance of industrial power, strategic foresight, and adaptability in wartime. The German Air Force could win battles, but it could not sustain a prolonged conflict against a global adversary capable of overwhelming production, and Göring's confidence would soon face the harsh reality of a world at total war. As the United States embarked on its ambitious plan to build tens of thousands of military aircraft, it faced not only technical and logistical challenges but also widespread doubts and skepticism. Both within the government and among the general public, many questioned whether such an enormous undertaking was achievable. Critics argued that the American economy, though large, was untested in the rigors of total war production, and that the goal of producing 50,000 aircraft in a matter of years was nothing short of impossible. President Franklin D. Roosevelt and his advisors understood these concerns but remained resolute. They knew that air power would be decisive in the coming conflict and that hesitation or delay could cost the Allies critical time. In response, the government launched a comprehensive campaign to mobilize public support and coordinate industrial efforts. The creation of the War Production Board centralized control over materials, labor, and production schedules, ensuring that every resource was directed toward the war effort. Skepticism was not confined to civilians. Within the military, some officers doubted that the United States could produce aircraft at the necessary scale without compromising quality. There were concerns that inexperienced workers would make costly mistakes, that supply chains could falter, and that coordination between factories would be impossible. To overcome these doubts, Roosevelt and his team implemented rigorous planning and oversight. Production targets were broken down into achievable monthly goals. Factories were inspected and upgraded, and engineers were dispatched to troubleshoot inefficiencies. One of the most significant challenges was convincing private industry to adapt to wartime demands. Automobile companies, accustomed to producing consumer vehicles, needed to transition to aircraft manufacturing. Executives and engineers had to embrace new methods, from assembly line reconfiguration to standardization of aircraft components. To motivate them, the government offered lucrative contracts and emphasized patriotic duty, framing industrial mobilization as a national mission. Public perception also had to be addressed. Initially, many Americans found it hard to grasp the scale of the aircraft program. Posters, speeches, and newsreels highlighted the importance of air power and the role citizens played in supporting production, fostering a sense of shared purpose. Iconic campaigns like the image of Rosie the Riveter symbolized the contributions of women who filled roles traditionally reserved for men, demonstrating that commitment and skill could overcome previous limitations. As factories ramped up production, initial setbacks were inevitable. Supply shortages, mechanical failures, and workforce inexperience caused delays, fueling critics' doubts. However, the American system proved remarkably adaptive. Engineers refined assembly processes, managers restructured shifts, and workers received ongoing training. Mistakes became learning opportunities, and production steadily increased. Within a few years, the United States was producing thousands of aircraft per month, a rate that astonished both allies and adversaries. The success in overcoming doubt was not merely a matter of technical achievement. It reflected the power of leadership, vision, and perseverance. Roosevelt's unwavering commitment, coupled with the cooperation of military leaders, industrial managers, and the American workforce, transformed skepticism into confidence. By 1943, America had not only met its original goals, but was on track to surpass them, demonstrating that belief, when paired with planning and determination, could turn what seemed impossible into reality. Hermann Göring and the German High Command had ridiculed America's plans, assuming that sheer ambition could not compensate for inexperience. Yet, as production accelerated, it became clear that American determination, industrial capability, and strategic organization would redefine the balance of power. Overcoming doubts and skepticism was a crucial step in this transformation, proving that vision and action, even in the face of widespread disbelief, could achieve extraordinary results. This chapter of history illustrates a fundamental lesson: the ability to confront uncertainty, manage challenges, and inspire collective effort can turn ambition into achievement. The United States experience demonstrates that skepticism, when met with preparation, innovation, and leadership, can be overcome, setting the stage for the remarkable contributions that would ultimately help win the war. In the late 1930s, as Europe teetered on the edge of war, Hermann Göring, the powerful commander of the Luftwaffe, exuded supreme confidence in Germany's air superiority. He believed that the Luftwaffe, forged from the lessons of World War I and strengthened under the Nazi regime, could dominate the skies over any adversary. Göring often boasted of Germany's unmatched air power, claiming that no nation could match the speed, precision, and lethality of the German Air Force. In 1939, with tensions escalating across the continent, news reached Göring and the German High Command of America's ambitious plan to construct 50,000 military aircraft. To the Luftwaffe chief, the number sounded laughable, almost absurd. He reportedly scoffed at the idea, considering it a fantasy of an industrially immature nation still recovering from the Great Depression. Göring's laughter echoed through the halls of Berlin as he dismissed the United States' capability to transform such plans into reality. Göring's reaction was rooted not only in confidence but also in a deep underestimation of American industrial power. The Luftwaffe had been carefully designed to execute blitzkrieg tactics, combining fast, coordinated airstrikes with ground offensives. Germany's success in Poland, and soon in Western Europe, seemed to validate his arrogance. He was convinced that the United States, separated by oceans and lacking wartime experience, could never translate ambition into action. However, what Göring failed to recognize was the unique advantage America possessed: its industrial base, its vast natural resources, and its culture of innovation. While Germany's war machine was formidable, it was limited by the size of its population, its factories, and its raw materials. In contrast, the United States had millions of workers, thousands of factories, and access to nearly unlimited steel, aluminum, and fuel. American leaders had begun planning a mobilization of unprecedented scale, aiming not merely to match, but to surpass any possible enemy air power. Despite Göring's ridicule, behind the scenes, American engineers, factory managers, and laborers were already laying the groundwork for what would become one of history's greatest feats of industrial mobilization. Automobile plants were converted to aircraft production, new assembly lines were built, and a culture of efficiency and mass production flourished. Roosevelt and his advisors understood that air superiority would be decisive, and they set targets that seemed almost impossible, including building 50,000 planes in just a few years. The story of Göring's mockery is not just a tale of arrogance, but also a foreshadowing of the dramatic reversal to come. While he laughed at the United States' plans, that laughter would later turn to shock and disbelief as America not only met its targets but doubled them, producing over 100,000 aircraft by the height of the war. Göring's confidence in the Luftwaffe blinded him to the scale of America's industrial capacity and the speed with which a determined nation could mobilize for total war. In hindsight, Göring's dismissal of the United States was emblematic of a larger failure in Nazi strategic thinking. Leaders often overestimated their own capabilities while underestimating those of distant adversaries. His laughter, recorded in historical accounts, became symbolic of hubris, an arrogance that, in the brutal calculus of war, would have dire consequences. This chapter of history reminds us that preparation, industrial capacity, and strategic vision are as critical as battlefield tactics. Goring's mockery, though seemingly trivial at the moment, serves as a cautionary tale. No amount of confidence can substitute for the tangible ability to produce, mobilize, and sustain military power. As the clouds of war gathered over Europe, the seeds of America's unprecedented contribution to victory were already being sown, quietly proving that ambition, backed by capability, could outmatch even the most derisive skeptics. As Europe plunged deeper into war, the United States observed the conflict with a mixture of concern and determination. While geographically distant from the battlefields of France and Poland, American leaders understood that the outcome of the war could directly affect national security and global stability. In this context, the United States began to devise an audacious plan to build 50,000 military aircraft, an unprecedented scale of production that would challenge the capabilities of even the most confident adversaries, including Nazi Germany. The plan was visionary, yet it faced immediate skepticism both abroad and at home. Many believed that producing such a vast number of aircraft within a few years was impossible. Critics argued that the United States lacked the industrial capacity and labor force to achieve this goal. Nevertheless, President Franklin D. Roosevelt and his advisors recognized that air power would be decisive in any modern conflict. Aircraft could strike enemy positions, protect naval convoys, support ground troops, and ultimately shape the outcome of the war. Air superiority was no longer optional. It was essential. To accomplish this ambitious target, the United States leveraged its existing industrial infrastructure in a way no other nation had attempted. Automobile factories were converted into aircraft assembly lines. Steel, aluminum, and other essential raw materials were redirected from civilian manufacturing to military production. Engineers redesigned production processes for efficiency, introducing assembly line techniques that could produce planes faster and more reliably than ever before. Every component, from engines to fuselage panels, was standardized to accelerate production and simplify repairs. The government also invested heavily in workforce expansion and training. Millions of men and women were recruited into factories, many for the first time, creating a diverse and highly skilled labor pool. Women, who had previously been excluded from industrial production on a large scale, played a crucial role. Their contribution was immortalized in the iconic image of Rosie the Riveter, symbolizing the industrial might that underpinned the ambitious plan. Strategically, the United States did not focus on building a single type of aircraft. The production plan included fighters, bombers, transport planes, and reconnaissance aircraft. Each served a specific purpose. Fighters like the P-51 Mustang ensured air superiority. Bombers such as the B-17 Flying Fortress could reach deep into enemy territory. Transports moved troops and supplies across oceans, and reconnaissance aircraft provided crucial intelligence. By diversifying production, America ensured that its air force could meet multiple operational demands simultaneously. Despite the challenges, American leaders set ambitious production milestones. The plan was not merely about reaching 50,000 aircraft, it was about creating a sustainable, scalable program capable of adapting to the rapidly changing demands of war. Factory managers, engineers, and laborers rose to the challenge, often exceeding expectations. By 1943, just a few years after the plan's inception, production rates had skyrocketed, signaling that the United States was capable of far more than initially imagined. What Goring and the German High Command failed to grasp was the sheer scale and speed of American mobilization. While they had dismissed the 50,000 plane goal as laughable, the United States was poised not only to meet it but to surpass it, ultimately producing over 100,000 aircraft during the course of the war. This ambitious plan would become a cornerstone of Allied victory, proving that industrial capability, when combined with strategic vision, could change the course of history. America's ambitious aircraft production plan demonstrates the power of foresight, planning, and national unity. It was not just a military strategy but a statement of intent, that a nation committed to mobilization and innovation could transform ambition into reality. As the Luftwaffe continued to dominate the skies over Europe, the United States quietly prepared to challenge that supremacy on a scale that would astonish friend and foe alike. The stage was set for a dramatic clash of industrial might and aerial power, a confrontation that would ultimately redefine the modern concept of warfare. By the early 1940s, the United States had fully committed to its unprecedented aircraft production program, transforming its industrial base into a wartime engine capable of producing tens of thousands of planes. What had once seemed an impossible goal, a fleet of 50,000 aircraft, was now becoming a tangible reality. Each month brought new milestones, each factory output a testament to the nation's determination and ingenuity. One of the first major achievements was the rapid scale-up of production in key aircraft factories. Automobile plants in Detroit and other industrial centers were converted into specialized assembly lines for military aircraft. Engineers optimized every step of the process, introducing modular construction techniques that allowed different components to be built simultaneously and then assembled quickly. The result was a dramatic increase in output. By mid-1942, the United States was producing several thousand planes per month, a rate that far exceeded initial projections and stunned military planners worldwide. The production milestones were not just numbers. They represented the successful integration of multiple complex systems. Factories produced fighters like the P-51 Mustang, bombers such as the B-17 Flying Fortress and B-24 Liberator, and transport planes including the C-47 Skytran. Each type of aircraft had unique design specifications and production requirements, yet American industry managed to scale production efficiently without sacrificing quality. Standardization of parts and streamlined assembly lines ensured that planes could be produced faster and maintained more easily in the field. Beyond the factories, the achievement of these milestones relied on the extraordinary mobilization of human labor. Millions of Americans, including men who had previously been in civilian jobs and women entering the workforce in unprecedented numbers, contributed to meeting production targets. Training programs were rapidly implemented to teach workers the skills needed to build, inspect, and repair complex machinery. The dedication and skill of these laborers transformed the abstract goal of 50,000 planes into tangible, operational aircraft ready for deployment. Government oversight and coordination played a critical role as well. The War Production Board and other agencies monitored progress closely, setting monthly quotas and intervening wherever bottlenecks occurred. Companies were incentivized to exceed targets, with bonuses and recognition for exceptional performance. This combination of accountability, innovation, and motivation created a production culture capable of remarkable achievements. By 1943, America reached a crucial milestone. The original goal of 50,000 planes was not only met but on track to be exceeded. This achievement had far-reaching implications. It signaled to both allies and adversaries that the United States could sustain long-term, large-scale production, fundamentally altering strategic calculations. For the Axis powers, especially Hermann Göring and the Luftwaffe, it became increasingly clear that Germany's elite-focused air force could not match the sheer numbers and logistical support of American industry. The subsequent milestones continued at an astonishing pace. By the end of the war, the United States had produced over 100,000 aircraft, more than doubling the initial target. Each milestone reflected improvements in technology, efficiency, and organization. New plants were opened, assembly lines refined, and innovations in materials and engineering continuously enhanced production capacity. This relentless progress transformed the United States into the arsenal of democracy, supplying not only its own military but also allies worldwide with the aircraft necessary to dominate the skies. These production milestones were more than numbers on a chart. They represented a paradigm shift in warfare. They demonstrated that industrial capacity, when combined with strategic planning and national resolve, could directly shape the outcome of conflict. The ability to produce vast numbers of aircraft quickly allowed the Allies to project power across oceans, sustain prolonged campaigns, and ultimately achieve air superiority. In retrospect, the milestones achieved by American industry illustrate a crucial lesson. In modern war, success depends not only on courage and skill on the battlefield but also on the ability to organize, innovate, and execute production at a massive scale. Each milestone achieved brought the United States closer to its ultimate goal, and by surpassing expectations, it turned what once seemed impossible into a defining advantage in World War II. By 1942, World War II had reached a critical juncture. The Luftwaffe had dominated the skies over Europe, demonstrating the deadly effectiveness of Germany's coordinated air strategy. Yet, the growing industrial might of the United States was beginning to shift the balance. The turning point in air warfare was not the result of a single battle but a combination of sustained production, strategic deployment, and technological innovation that began to overwhelm Axis forces. The United States' ability to produce aircraft at an unprecedented scale meant that the Allies could replace losses, expand operations, and maintain constant pressure on enemy forces. Bombers such as the B-17 Flying Fortress and B-24 Liberator were deployed in massive formations, capable of striking targets deep inside German territory. These long-range bombers were paired with fighters like the P-51 Mustang, which escorted them across hostile skies, protecting them from interception by Luftwaffe fighters. The combination of range, numbers, and coordination allowed the Allies to challenge German air superiority in a way that was previously unimaginable. One of the pivotal moments in air warfare occurred during the strategic bombing campaigns over Europe. German cities, industrial centers, and transportation networks became the focus of sustained aerial attacks. While initially costly in terms of Allied losses, these campaigns gradually weakened the Luftwaffe's operational capacity. German pilots were forced into defensive roles, factories were disrupted, and the morale of both the Luftwaffe and the German population began to waver. The balance of initiative had shifted, and the air war was no longer dominated solely by the Germans. Technological innovation also played a critical role in this turning point. Radar, improved aircraft engines, and advanced bombing techniques enhanced the effectiveness of Allied operations. The P-51 Mustang, in particular, revolutionized air combat with its long range and superior maneuverability, allowing it to escort bombers deep into enemy territory for the first time. This innovation directly challenged the Luftwaffe's ability to intercept and destroy Allied bombers, marking a significant shift in the tactical balance of air power. Equally important was the integration of industrial production with strategic planning. The United States' ability to continuously produce thousands of aircraft, combined with effective pilot training and logistical support, meant that the Allies could sustain pressure over time. Unlike the Luftwaffe, which faced limitations in numbers and resources, the Allies could replace losses and maintain operational tempo. This endurance became a decisive factor, highlighting the importance of industrial capacity in modern air warfare. The turning point also demonstrated the significance of intelligence and coordination. Aerial reconnaissance, code-breaking, and careful planning allowed the Allies to target the most critical components of the German war machine. Factories, railways, and oil production facilities were systematically attacked, forcing the Luftwaffe to defend multiple fronts simultaneously. This dispersal of resources diluted their effectiveness and exposed the limits of Germany's air strategy. By the mid-1940s, the cumulative effect of these factors had become undeniable. The Luftwaffe, once confident of its dominance, now faced an enemy with overwhelming numbers, superior logistical support, and innovative technology. Hermann Göring's earlier mockery of American production now contrasted sharply with the reality of the battlefield. where the Allies' growing air power dictated the pace of operations. The turning point in air warfare had arrived, marking a shift from defensive struggles to sustained Allied offensives. This chapter of history underscores a vital lesson. Air superiority is not determined solely by skill or tactics in isolated battles, but by the combination of industrial capacity, technological advancement, strategic vision, and coordination. The United States' ability to harness these elements transformed the air war, demonstrating that sustained production, innovation, and planning could decisively alter the course of conflict. In the skies over Europe, the turning point had been achieved, setting the stage for the eventual defeat of the Axis powers. By 1944, the lessons of industrial power in modern warfare had become abundantly clear. The United States, through an unprecedented mobilization of factories, workforce, and resources, had demonstrated that industrial capacity could directly determine the outcome of a global conflict. While individual heroism and tactical brilliance remained important, it was the ability to produce, sustain, and deploy massive quantities of equipment that ultimately defined strategic advantage. The scale of America's industrial mobilization was unparalleled. At the height of World War II, the United States produced over 100,000 aircraft, tens of thousands of tanks, and countless other vehicles, weapons, and supplies. Factories operated around the clock, employing millions of workers, including women and minorities who had previously been excluded from industrial roles. This massive effort allowed the Allies to maintain operational pressure across multiple theaters, replace losses swiftly, and sustain prolonged campaigns that Germany and Japan could not match. One of the critical lessons was the importance of standardization and efficient production methods. By creating uniform components and streamlining assembly lines, the United States was able to scale production rapidly while maintaining quality. Engineers and managers implemented innovations such as modular construction and parallel assembly, techniques adapted from peacetime industries like automobile manufacturing. This efficiency meant that aircraft, tanks, and ships could be produced in numbers that outpaced the ability of Axis powers to destroy or counter them. Another lesson was the value of integrating industrial planning with strategic military objectives. Production was not simply about output, it was about delivering the right equipment at the right time and place. Priorities were set based on operational needs, ensuring that resources supported key campaigns such as the invasion of Normandy, the air campaign over Germany, and the Pacific island hopping operations. Industrial planning became a force multiplier, directly enhancing the effectiveness of military strategy. The experience also underscored the significance of human capital. Millions of Americans, from factory workers to engineers, were mobilized in a shared national effort. Training programs, incentives, and a sense of patriotic duty ensured that the workforce remained motivated and skilled. The contributions of women, exemplified by the iconic figure of Rosie the Riveter, and the participation of minority workers, highlighted how inclusivity and mobilization of all available talent could amplify industrial power. Comparing the Allied experience to Germany's approach illustrates the strategic consequences of industrial limitations. The Luftwaffe, despite being technologically advanced and tactically skilled, could not match the scale of American production. Göring's earlier mockery of the United States' capabilities became a symbol of hubris, showing that elite skill without sufficient industrial backing is insufficient in total war. The Allies' ability to produce overwhelming numbers of aircraft, tanks, and ships eventually outmatched even the most formidable Axis forces, reshaping the balance of power. The lessons of industrial power extend beyond raw numbers. Coordination, logistics, and innovation are equally vital. The United States' success relied on integrating factories, supply chains, and distribution networks into a coherent system capable of responding to changing battlefield conditions. This holistic approach ensured that production was not just high in quantity but strategically effective, delivering real impact on the front lines. Ultimately, the American experience during World War II demonstrates that industrial power is as decisive as strategy and tactics. Nations that can mobilize resources, organize production efficiently, and align industrial efforts with military objectives gain a critical advantage in warfare. The transformation of American industry into the arsenal of democracy provided a template for understanding modern conflict, illustrating that victory depends not only on courage and skill but on the ability to produce, innovate, and sustain the tools of war at a massive scale. This chapter emphasizes that the lessons of industrial power are timeless. Whether in World War II or in contemporary conflicts, the capacity to convert ambition into tangible production, to coordinate resources effectively, and to sustain effort over time remains a decisive factor. The United States' achievement highlights the profound impact that industrial strength can have on global events, shaping not only the outcome of wars, but the course of history itself. By 1943, the true scale of America's industrial power had become undeniable. Hermann Göring, once brimming with confidence and openly mocking the United States' ambitious aircraft plans, was now faced with a reality that challenged everything he had believed. The Luftwaffe, which had dominated European skies at the beginning of the war, was suddenly confronted by a relentless wave of Allied aircraft, backed by numbers, technology, and logistical support that Germany could no longer match. Göring's shock was compounded by the speed and efficiency of American production. The United States had not only reached its initial goal of 50,000 aircraft but had surpassed it, producing over 100,000 planes by the war's height. Each month brought new formations of fighters, bombers, and transport planes into the European theater, striking German targets with unprecedented consistency. Factories that Göring had assumed were incapable of such output had become the backbone of the Allied air offensive. This sudden shift in air power forced Göring into a defensive posture. For the first time in the war, the Luftwaffe was no longer the dominant force. German pilots, once feared and respected for their skill and effectiveness, now faced overwhelming numbers of enemy aircraft. Missions that had previously been executed with precision and confidence were increasingly met with heavy resistance, losses mounting with every sortie. The reality of sustained attrition was stark. Germany's air force, despite its elite status, could not keep pace with the industrial output and operational scale of the Allies. Strategic bombing campaigns played a crucial role in this realization. American bombers targeted key industrial centers, oil refineries, transportation networks, and military installations deep within German territory. The destruction of critical infrastructure hindered aircraft production, maintenance, and fuel supply, further weakening the Luftwaffe's operational capacity. Göring had underestimated not only the number of planes the United States could build, but also the precision and effectiveness with which they would be deployed. Göring's personal hubris was on full display as he struggled to comprehend the scale of the American threat. Historical accounts describe his disbelief at the speed and efficiency of production lines, the skill of pilots, and the relentless tempo of Allied operations. The mockery he once voiced about the United States plans now contrasted sharply with the harsh reality confronting him. His assumptions about American industrial inferiority were entirely wrong. The Luftwaffe, no longer able to sustain offensive operations, had to contend with a sky increasingly dominated by superior numbers and strategic coordination. The psychological impact on the German high command was significant. Göring's shock permeated the Luftwaffe's leadership, causing strategic indecision and internal tension. Plans that once relied on air superiority had to be reconsidered, as the Allies now dictated the tempo of operations. The overconfidence that had defined German air strategy in the early years of the war was replaced by a cautious and defensive mindset, a recognition that they could no longer assume control of the skies. This moment of realization illustrates a fundamental principle of warfare. No amount of arrogance or early success can compensate for the enemy's ability to mobilize, innovate, and sustain production on an unprecedented scale. Göring's initial dismissal of American capability, once a symbol of confidence and hubris, became a cautionary tale. The Allies' capacity to produce, deploy, and maintain air power reshaped the dynamics of the conflict, turning the tide against Germany in ways that elite skill alone could not counter. Ultimately, Göring's shock and realization marked a turning point not only for the Luftwaffe but for the entire war. It highlighted the decisive role of industrial might, strategic foresight, and sustained effort in modern conflict. The United States had demonstrated that ambition, when combined with organization and capacity, could overwhelm even the most confident adversary, proving that in total war, production and planning are as vital as tactics and courage on the battlefield. By the end of World War II, the transformation of America's aviation ambitions from a seemingly impossible plan into a decisive reality had become one of history's most remarkable achievements. In the late 1930s, Hermann Göring, the commander of the Luftwaffe, had openly mocked the United States' plan to build 50,000 military aircraft. To him, such ambition was laughable, a fantasy of a nation inexperienced in war and industrial mobilization. Yet, by 1945, that mockery stood in stark contrast to the overwhelming reality. The United States had not only met its original goal but had more than doubled it, producing over 100,000 aircraft. Fighters, bombers, transport planes, and reconnaissance aircraft rolled off assembly lines in quantities that stunned both allies and adversaries. Factories operated around the clock, employing millions of workers who had been trained, motivated, and organized to achieve what had once seemed impossible. Women, symbolized by Rosie the Riveter, played an indispensable role, along with men, minorities, and immigrants, all contributing to a national effort that transformed industry into a powerful weapon of war. This massive production capability translated directly into battlefield impact. Allied air forces gained numerical superiority, allowing for sustained bombing campaigns over Europe and the Pacific. The P-51 Mustang escorted bombers deep into enemy territory, reducing losses and increasing effectiveness. Long-range bombers like the B-17 Flying Fortress and B-24 Liberator struck factories, transportation networks, and oil refineries, crippling Axis industrial capacity. The ability to maintain pressure, replace losses, and expand operations continuously underscored the critical importance of industrial strength. Göring's earlier assumptions about American limitations were shattered. The Luftwaffe, despite its elite pilots and advanced aircraft, could not match the quantity and logistical support of the Allied air forces. What had begun as mockery evolved into shock and realization. Industrial capacity, strategic planning, and national determination could outweigh technological skill or battlefield prowess. The lesson was clear. In total war, the ability to mobilize and sustain production is as decisive as any tactical or strategic advantage. The journey from mockery to reality also illustrates the power of vision, leadership, and collective effort. President Franklin D. Roosevelt and his advisors had recognized early on that air superiority would be crucial and that achieving it required unparalleled organization, investment, and coordination. The United States leveraged its existing industrial infrastructure, adapted production techniques from civilian industries, and integrated military priorities with manufacturing capability. This holistic approach ensured that ambition was not merely rhetorical. It became operationally effective. The impact of this transformation extended beyond military outcomes. The United States emerged as a global industrial and military powerhouse, capable of influencing events far beyond its borders. The success of its aircraft production program demonstrated that a nation's capacity to harness resources, innovate, and execute large-scale plans could decisively alter the course of history. Göring's derision, once confident and dismissive, now symbolized the dangers of underestimating industrial power and overestimating tactical superiority. In retrospect, the story of America's aircraft production stands as a testament to the intersection of ambition, organization, and capability. From the initial skepticism and mockery it faced, the program evolved into a defining factor in Allied victory. It proved that what seems impossible can be achieved when vision is paired with resources, planning, and collective effort. The journey from mockery to reality is a lesson not only for historians but for all who seek to understand the transformative power of industry and strategy in shaping the outcome of global events. Ultimately, this chapter encapsulates the broader narrative of World War II air power. The United States' capacity to convert ambition into tangible, overwhelming force reshaped the skies, humbled a confident adversary, and demonstrated that the combination of industrial might, strategic vision, and relentless execution could turn laughter into awe and mockery into historical reality.